Good evening, you're watching London Live News at 6 with Helena Warrior. Coming up tonight, 6 police forces in England, including the Metropolitan Police, have been placed under special measures after a series of failures, including misogyny and substandard responses. Chaos today at Heathrow as passengers complain after airport airlines remove 30 flights from today's schedule. We'll have an update on London's weather in the next 10 minutes. Plus, from Formula 1 to Formula E, the new sport is taking to the streets of the capital, showcasing the world's most powerful electric cars in a driving force for sustainability. And drag superstar Courtney Act has visited the studio to tell us all about her new empowering, emotional and a little bit racy book. We'll be speaking to the drag icon a little bit later. First tonight, though, it has been announced that 6 police forces in England, including the Metropolitan Police, have been placed under special measures after a series of failures. It comes after extensive criticism following the death of Sarah Everard, who was abducted and murdered by serving Met Police officer Wayne Couzens, and the Charing Cross police station scandal, in which officers were found to have been exchanging racist, sexist and homophobic messages. Well, inspectors raised systemic concerns about the Met, including its substandard response to emergency calls, barely adequate crime recording and a backlog of child abuse referrals. Well, a watchdog letter to the Met said failures have been exacerbated by the number of young and inexperienced recruits brought in as a part of the national drive to replace thousands of officers cut during austerity measures. Well, a Conservative MP asked Transport Secretary Grant Shapps today whether Transport for London should also be put into a form of special measures after criticising Sadiq Khan for overseeing more tube strikes than his predecessor. Speaking in the Commons, the MP for Cities of London and Westminster, Nikki Aiken, suggested TfL should also be placed under the same status, blaming the Mayor of London for tube strikes and wanting to slash buses.
More strike days on the tube under this current mayor than the previous, with the current mayor wanting to slash our bus services, particularly the 24 and 211 in my constituency. And now with the Met in special measures, does my right honourable friend think that it's now time that the Department of Transport considers putting TfL in special measures?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend makes a very interesting point, and I notice from the benches opposite that they constantly call for me to enter into direct negotiations with the unions. They may be able to tell us whether the Mayor of London has done the same things with the RMT strikes, and if he has, it hasn't worked, and if he hasn't, why aren't they calling on him to do that? But to add to her lengthy list of problems, I've had a letter yesterday from the monitoring officer at the Greater London Authority who says that she will now be referring to the formal process for the complaints guidance as a result of the Mayor releasing information about both the Elizabeth line and TfL in advance of the markets.
Well, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, had previously warned that TfL had been left with no choice but to begin preparations for a state of managed decline, and that major tube and bus cuts on services are imminent without a long-term plan from the government. Well, also in the House of Commons today, Transport Minister Grant Shapps has said there is no excuse for further travel disruption ahead of the school summer holidays. After condemning the recent rail strikes by the RMT union, Mr Shapps said any aviation strikes that cause disruption at airports should be avoided, and that the government has put in a potential compensation plan if they do go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, I know that the whole House will share our concerns about the potential for aviation disruption this summer. Millions of families are looking forward to getting away on holiday, perhaps the first one they've had since the pandemic. We appreciate the airports are busy as they recover, but the very last thing we want to see repeated are the scenes that we saw at Easter and the half-term. So let me stress, there's absolutely no excuse for further widespread disruption. It's now more than 100 days since we announced easing of travel restrictions. But to further support the industry as it prepares for the summer, today I'm announcing a 22-point plan with a written ministerial statement to this House to help recruit, retain staff, improve resilience so that passenger disruption this summer is minimised, and to make sure that if delays do unfortunately occur, travellers get properly compensated. These measures are what we're doing, and we'll look for the aviation sector to do their part.
There we are, that was Grant Shapps, but there was already some disruption at Heathrow Airport today, where passengers have complained of queues and chaos after the airport asked airlines to remove 30 flights from the schedule. The London airport said the cancellations were necessary for safety, as it was expecting more passenger numbers than it can currently cope with. However, some passengers did not find out their flights were cancelled until they arrived at what is the UK's busiest airport. Well, a Heathrow spokesperson apologised and said they are working with airlines to get affected passengers rebooked onto other flights. Now, we're about the midway point for London Climate Action Week, and today the London Fire Brigade has announced investment in the UK's first electric hybrid fire engine. The announcement was made as part of the Brigade's commitment to significantly reduce carbon emissions in support of the Mayor of London's ambition for the capital to be net zero carbon by 2030. Well, the Brigade will also be the first fire and rescue service to use an electric hybrid fire engine when it's due to start being trialled later this year. Now, London-based Formula One Supremo Bernie Ecclestone has said that he would take a bullet for Russian President Vladimir Putin in an interview on Good Morning Britain. He also went on to say that he still considers Putin a friend. Well, Formula One released a statement saying the comments by the sport's former boss are in stark contrast to modern values and reflect Ecclestone's personal views. Ecclestone is said to have built up a relationship with Putin when they were establishing the Russian Grand Prix, which debuted in 2014. Now, yesterday saw British US Open champion Emma Raducanu beaten by Caroline Garcia of France in her first Wimbledon tournament. And today, matches have continued in the southwest London location. Although, according to new figures, total attendance at this year's Wimbledon is down 11% so far compared with 2019. The lower figures could be attributed to an after effect of the pandemic, as Wimbledon was cancelled in 2020 and returned in 2021, but with reduced capacity. Spectators believe the cost of living crisis and unsettled weather is also to blame for a lower than expected turnout. Well, talking about the weather, let's have a look at it now for you. It's a dry night to come with lows of around 12 degrees overnight. Friday looks to become more settled with long sunny spells and highs of 22. Looking ahead, it's a dry and sunny start on Saturday, but a band of cloud accompanied by a few showers is expected to move through around the middle of the day, and it's more of the same throughout the end of the weekend on Sunday. Well, just before the break, let's bring you this. Dame Deborah James's Bow Babe Fund has reached £7 million in donations following her death. The podcast host, who died on Tuesday, aged 40, after being diagnosed with bowel cancer in 2016, launched the fund in early May after announcing she had stopped active treatment and was receiving end-of-life care. Well, Dame Deborah initially hoped to raise £250,000 for the charity, but donations have hit over the 7 million milestone. The chief executive of Cancer Research UK has said it is a fitting legacy and tribute. Right, it's time for a break now, but when we come back, London Live's paper reviewer Matt Withers will be here to tell us all about the stories making headlines in the local papers, including a power-happy mayor and a winning North London school.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute, That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to London Live News. Now let's turn our attention to the stories making headlines in the local papers. Well, here to take us through them is London Live's paper reviewer Matt Withers. Matt, let's start with this. It's a granddad who won a court battle against Westminster City Council. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's quite a David and Goliath type affair here. There's a pensioner who won a battle against Westminster City Council because they sought to ban him from, quote, playing dominoes loudly, which seems quite the achievement in itself, at a square in West London. This is Ernest Fearfile. He's 74. He says he's in tears after the conclusion of an ordeal, really, that's taken 18 months, left him quite depressed and lonely. He was unable to socialise with friends at Maida Hill Market Square, which is a predominantly Caribbean area, after the council took out an injunction saying that he would be fined or arrested if they deemed him responsible for noise and antisocial behaviour. Bearing in mind this gentleman is 74, at a busy public square. But the judge in this case on Monday ruled in favour of him. Quite fittingly on Windrush Day, because he was a Windrush Generation Londoner.
Well, this has raised wider questions, hasn't it, about the Windrush generation and how they have been treated in the past and still treated now.
Yeah, one of the people who represented him, Jackie Haynes, who was a campaigner on Grenfell, but she represented him to a certain degree in this case because, as she said, he's not computer literate. He couldn't represent himself. And she talks about how the Windrush generation have been treated, saying, you know, it was like, our country needs your help, so I'm going to draft you into the motherland. And then once we're finished, go away. Go away isn't the language she used, but people will get the impression. I mean, it's a very strange case, really, from the off. Another person was named in the injunction, and that person had died 2 years previously, so it showed that the council had really done a botched job on this. And what they're calling for now is for the council to formally provide a space for them and other domino players to gather on a permanent basis.
Well, I hope they get that then. Well, moving on then, this has a great headline, this article. Croydon Mayor defends choice to make all decisions himself.
Yes, and it's true. This is literally what has happened. It's in the Croydon Guardian. This is Croydon's brand new mayor, Jason Perry. He's a Conservative. He's the first directly elected mayor for Croydon, and he's defended this choice to make all decisions himself. On Monday, he went before the council's Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and he was asked why it was that he had appointed 8 cabinet members, but he's not delegated any powers to them. He has said that he's going to take every single decision. He said this is the first time this borough's had a directly elected mayor, and I think there's a point of view that this person has been elected, and then the first thing they do is give away all their powers. There's a kind of element of you've been entrusted to do a job, and to give it all away from day one is unwise. If you were brought in to deal with a company that was in trouble, I don't think the first thing you would do is to delegate powers, which rather suggests he's never worked for or run a company, because obviously micromanagement is not necessarily seen as the best way forward in the private sector.
No. And also, I suppose this does raise a question about whether the cabinet members who are paid to do a job are actually doing their jobs.
Absolutely, and this is what came up. A councillor, Layla Ben Hassel, said, well, she asked him directly whether he would reduce the money paid to cabinet members, and these are big numbers. Cabinet members, they already get £11,692 for being a councillor, but as a cabinet member they get an additional £27,503 on top of that. And the cabinet member for finance, which is seen as the biggest role in local government, gets an extra £30,352. But he said that he will not be docking any of their pay, saying they don't have that final piece of decision making, but they are very much part of the process. I am very much a team player, which kind of contradicts everything that he said previously.
Absolutely brilliant. Right, OK, let's move on then to a man from Hornchurch who's created what's called a turning aid to care for his terminally ill wife at home, and now he's kind of giving them out for free.
Yeah, this is quite an interesting tale from the Romford Recorder. As you say, this is a husband who created this kind of invention to help to look after his wife when she was very ill. He spent 2 years caring for it's a guy called Barry Newton. He spent 2 years caring for his wife of 52 years, Patricia. She actually died last year at age 74 from a brain tumour. But he spent around £8,000 to create what he calls Newton's roller, which helps carers turn patients over in bed. And anyone who's had elderly relatives knows that usually that is a job for more than 2 care staff often. But he has created this kind of contraption that will allow one person at home to do it, saying it's easy to use, hygienic and comfortable for the patient. If you decide you want your loved one to stay at home and be cared for, and there are situations when you need to roll them over, this is the ideal product. And you're right, he is now giving them away. All he's asking for people is to get feedback on them. He's still got 90 left. He's giving them to people locally in Havering. And then when he's got that feedback and he's happy with the product, he will sell, one assumes, the copyright on this, with all the profits going to St Francis Hospice. So I'd be interested to know his background. You know, I'm not sure if he comes from a kind of engineering stroke technical background, it's certainly quite an interesting idea.
Absolutely, it's quite a remarkable product to make, and I hope I hope the future holds good things for him. Right, well, finally, there's an academy in North London which could be named as the world's best school, which is quite an accolade.
Absolutely, it is. This is from the Times series of papers in North London. Actually, a few schools in London are up for this, but they've focused on one of their local ones, which is the Totteridge Academy. And it's one of 50 schools nominated for, and it is the world's best school prize, which has been launched by a company called T4 Education, for which it could be eligible for a share of a $250,000 prize. It's been noted for its work with a charity to transform a disused field into an area where healthy organic school food could be grown, which is peak North London, some people may suggest, but it's not the only one. St Helens in Northwood and the London Academy of Excellence in Newham, which I think we've spoken about a few times here, which has got a very good reputation for sending its schools to Oxbridge, are up for it as well. So yeah, good luck to all of those.
Absolutely, we'll keep an eye out. Good luck to those schools in North London. Well, Matt Withers, thank you so much for joining us on London Live News. Now let's take a look at this. The world of Formula One has been at the forefront of motorsport and has captivated audiences for well over 50 years. But now there's a new sport on the rise. Well, next month, London is welcoming Formula E to the streets of the capital. The sport showcases the world's most powerful electric cars and displays a driving force for sustainability and diversity. Well, Henry has been speaking to the managing director of one of the teams ahead of the race weekend.
We are really first pushing the boundaries of electric vehicle technology, and also it's the mix of technology and sport and passion. It's a cutting-edge technology, but ultimately it's a sport. The athletes, the drivers, the teams behind the drivers. It's a very close championship, very competitive, and you genuinely never know who's going to win the next race. I couldn't tell you. So the fans certainly can't, and that makes it a really exciting sport, I think.
So what does the London E-Prix mean for the promotion and increase of sustainability in London? Environmental issues have really come to the fore over the last year or so.
Absolutely. So the aim of Formula E is to travel around the world to showcase the best of electric vehicle technology and try to educate and get people excited about the future and electric cars and the fact that electric cars don't have to be boring. They can be super fun, super fast, and the future of mobility is a really good thing. So yeah, coming to London for us, it's so exciting, super important. London is one of our flagship events, racing at Excel. So yeah, of course, London, like most big cities, really is affected by pollution. That is really unpleasant when you live there, but actually, as we know, is the cause of the death of thousands of people because of respiratory illnesses and so on. So there's many reports, even from the UN, that showcase that. So yeah, the idea is to show that by moving transport and mobility in cities in particular to all electric, we'll have a benefit for climate change overall, but also a huge immediate benefit in terms of cleaning the air in cities.
But it has to be entertaining, it has to draw crowds and have fans and things like that. And I think there's a common misconception that electric means slower and boring. So why does choosing electric not mean those things to you?
Well, you're absolutely right. This is actually the reason why we started Formula E in the first place. 10 years ago, it was definitely the assumption, and to be fair, electric cars on the road 10 years ago kind of reinforced that feeling. But we knew at the time what was coming. Like I knew from the very beginning what the potential of the technology was and what you could do with it. It was a question of really implementing it and developing the tech and making it a reality. So that's why Formula E exists. Formula E exists literally to go to all these cities and say, look, electric cars can race at 150 miles an hour for almost an hour, and it's a really exciting sport. So if these cars can do that, then your electric car that you will buy now or in the very near future will definitely be good enough for your daily errands and go on holiday. Like it's a question of demonstrating the tech. But you're right, we actually spend an awful lot of time getting that perfect balance between getting the technology roadmap exciting, so really make it a real technology test bed for electric cars, but also the sport's got to be exciting. So it's actually a fine art to get the sporting regulations right.
And of course, when people say formula in motorsport, people think of Formula 1, 2, 3 and so on. Do you think in the future there won't be a Formula 1, 2 and 3 and there will just be, Formula E1, Formula E2 and so on?
Yeah, I get this question a lot. I think no, for sure, for still a very long time to come, you'll have both. You'll have, Formula 1 is still the pinnacle of petrol racing, and is an incredible entertainment platform and sport that's followed by a lot of people. So there's no reason for this to disappear. Of course, they have to adapt their technology roadmap and their regulations to be kind of current with the world we live in. But that will carry on for a very long time. And formally, we've said from day one, the idea is absolutely not to replace Formula 1. It's a new sport. It's a sport that's growing in parallel. But for sure, I predict that you will. Formally is growing, of course, at a very fast pace, and is now already one of the largest motorsports properties in the audience, number of times. So you will naturally start to see the beginning of a junior ladder for electric racing as well. There's no reason why not. Like we need the young drivers now in karting and other categories. They need that, I think, quite soon to have the choice to either go the petrol route or the electric route. And there's some interesting possibilities, right? Like in theory, if you develop a junior ladder categories for electric racing, you can make it potentially more affordable, because if the cars are a bit less complex, there's very few moving parts, very little maintenance required. You could develop a pretty cheap and very exciting electric F3 equivalent, So yeah, watch this space, but you will have the two in parallel for sure for a long time.
There we are. That was Sylvain Philippi, the Managing Director of Envision Racing there, ahead of next month's London E-Prix on the 30th and 31st of July. You're watching London Live News with Helena Wardier. A reminder of our top story coming up after the break. Plus, the James Bond masterminds who cast Daniel Craig and produced the last 9 007 films have been awarded BFI fellowships. We'll hear from them after the break.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to London Live News, a reminder of some of the stories affecting Londoners tonight. It has been announced that 6 police forces in England, including the Metropolitan Police, have been placed under special measures after a series of failures. It comes after extensive criticism following the death of Sarah Everard, who was abducted and murdered by serving Met Police officer Wayne Couzens, and the Charing Cross police station scandal, in which officers were found to have been exchanging racist, sexist and homophobic messages. Well, inspectors raised systemic concerns about the Met, including its substandard response to emergency calls, barely adequate crime recording and a backlog of child abuse referrals. A watchdog letter to the Met said failures have been exacerbated by the number of young and inexperienced recruits brought in as part of the national drive to replace thousands of officers cut during austerity measures. Well, a Conservative MP asked Transport Secretary Grant Shapps today whether Transport for London should also be put into a form of special measures after criticising Sadiq Khan for overseeing more tube strikes than his predecessor. Speaking in the Commons, the MP for Cities of London and Westminster, Nikki Aiken, suggested TfL should also be placed under the same status, blaming the Mayor of London for tube strikes and wanting to slash buses.
More strike days on the tube under this current mayor than the previous, with the current mayor wanting to slash our bus services, particularly the 24 and 211 in my constituency. And now with the Met in special measures, does my right honourable friend think that it's now time that the Department of Transport considers putting TfL in special measures?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend makes a very interesting point, and I notice from the benches opposite that they constantly call for me to enter into direct negotiations with the unions. They may be able to tell us whether the Mayor of London has done the same things with the RMT strikes, and if he has, it hasn't worked, and if he hasn't, why aren't they calling on him to do that?
Well, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, had previously warned that TfL had been left with no choice but to begin preparations for a state of managed decline, and that major tube and bus cuts on services are imminent without a long-term plan from the government. Well, also in the House of Commons today, Transport Minister Grant Shapps has said there is no excuse for further travel disruption ahead of the school summer holidays. After condemning the recent rail strikes by the RMT union, Mr Shapps said any aviation strikes that cause disruption at airports should be avoided, and that the government has put in a potential compensation plan if they do go ahead.
Today I'm announcing a 22-point plan with a written ministerial statement to this House to help recruit, retain staff, improve resilience so that passenger disruption this summer is minimised, and to make sure that if delays do unfortunately occur, travellers get properly compensated. These measures are what we're doing, and we'll look for the aviation sector to do their part.
Now, James Bond producers Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli have been awarded BFI Fellowships, the highest honour bestowed by the BFI. Well, they were given the honour at a special dinner at Claridge's alongside a host of stars. The sibling duo have produced the last 9 007 films, including Casino Royale, Skyfall and No Time to Die. They've also been credited with rejuvenating and reinventing the franchise, starting with their casting of Daniel Craig in 2005.
Well, I think, what's really special about Bond is that it's been reinvented every 5 or 6, years or films. It's been reinvented, and certainly when Daniel Craig came on board, we all forget how controversial a decision that was. Hashtag Bond is not blonde, and I think that speaks volumes about how the character and the franchise are actually thought of. And people are very passionate about it. And I think when Daniel Craig came in, he reinvented the entire franchise.
The man was Le Chiffre, private banker to the world's terrorists, which would explain how he could set up a high-stakes poker game at Casino Royale in Montenegro. If he loses this game, he'll have nowhere to run. You're the best player in the service.
The Treasury has agreed to stake you in the game. But if you lose, our government will have directly financed terrorism.
But actually really just such an incredible honour to be able to, give to incredible people who really are deserving of this award and who've just been so instrumental in my career and so many other careers, and are such wonderful people, as well as being hugely talented.
I agree with everything Naomi said. I think they have led this franchise for 60 years, taking over from Cubby Broccoli, and I think the way they've kept the franchise evolving and constantly entertaining and somehow relevant, somehow something that people look forward to. And I think to be here tonight, to be part of the BFI, bringing them into the fellowship fold, it's an honour.
What do you say about a man like that?
3 months ago, you lost the drive containing the identity of every agent embedded in terrorist organizations across the globe.
007 reporting for duty.
Where the hell have you been?
Enjoying death.
I only have one question. Why not stay dead? There's no shame in saying you've lost a step. Yes, currents change, social discourse changes. That's what happens, fashions change, what people expect of entertainment changes. And they've been able to acknowledge those shifts in the social temperature, but they've never stopped it being a James Bond film. And I think in the end people want that character, they want the action, they want mischief, and they want stuff that sometimes is a little provocative. So it's a huge producerial skill is needed, I think, to be alert to all those choppy waters.
Yeah, it's basically like walking a tightrope, and they do it so well because you want to keep all the traditional elements that people love about Bond, and then you also do want to keep it constantly evolving as well. And that's a really tricky balancing act to keep both parties happy, but they managed to do it.
The world is arming faster than we can respond. Where's 007?
I need a favor, brother. You're the only one I trust for this.
The world's moved on, Commander Bond.
You were 00?
2 years. So stay in your lane. You get in my way, I will put a bullet in your knee.
Well, it's everything, really. We've been together working on these films for 40 years. And grown up with them my entire life. So it's really everything. It's a family business, and we consider all the people we work with over the years family and extended family, and it's really
great
wonderful.
Working with all these people. It really is, and it's it's more than just a job. It's a lifetime of involvement, and trying to make films that are entertaining, relevant to what's going on in the world, and put Britain on the map.
Just look at you, chasing spies. England, MI6. She sent you after me knowing you're not ready, knowing you would likely die. Mommy was very bad.
I think he's a classic hero. He's out, not for his own personal benefit. He's out for Queen and country. He tries to do the best thing. He's very heroic, and I think people, admire that and look up to that. And he has some fun along the way, which, people enjoy as well. And we've been very, very lucky. We've had the most wonderful actors portraying Bond over the years, and we've had wonderful cast and crew and technicians. And so I think, the audiences have just appreciated, I think, all the craftsmanship that goes into the films.
You're watching London Live News. Time for a final break now, but when we come back, drag superstar, activist and all-round queer icon Courtney Act will be here. We'll be talking about her London life and new autobiography. See you soon.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to the final part of London Live News. Now, drag superstar Courtney Act, who made her name in Australia, America and here in London, has released a new book about the journey towards understanding gender, sexuality and identity. Perhaps best known as the star of RuPaul's Drag Race and the winner of Celebrity Big Brother here in the UK, Courtney, aka Shane Janek, joined me earlier to discuss the memoir titled Caught in the Act.
London audiences are, well, UK audiences at large are notorious for being wonderful, like loud, appreciative, like you know they're there, you know that they're having fun. The further north you go, the louder they get. But London is this sort of balance between polite and raucous that I kind of love.
Yeah, I would say that's very, very accurate.
Yeah.
Well, we'll hear all about, of course, you're not from London, you're from Sydney, and we'll hear
Yes.
all about that in your new book, Caught in the Act. Now, that title suggests there might be some racy content in there. Can you confirm or deny?
I can absolutely confirm. So, Caught in the Act is a play on Caught in the Act, which some people are only just catching on to. And I wanted to call the book Il Flagrante Delicto, which is a Latin legal term for caught in the act. And Katia from Drag Race was like, girl, you've got the title of your book, it's Caught in the Act. And I was like, oh yeah, I've never really used it. In 22 years of doing drag, I've never called a show Caught in the Act, and I think it was because I was saving it for the title of my memoir.
Absolutely, it's about time. I thought you dedicate the book to a few people, which is absolutely lovely, but I think possibly most importantly, you dedicate it to your 14-year-old self.
Yeah.
Why was that important for you to do?
Well, I guess I soon realised in my career early on, like in 2003, I was on Australian Idol, and I got a letter from a young boy who was struggling with his identity. He didn't know if he was gay or not, but he said that seeing me on Idol realised that if it was okay for me to be different, then it was okay for him to be different too. And that really like pivoted everything, where I realised that I had this opportunity to, you know, be the person that I needed to see on telly when I was 14. And it's a very different world now, which is wonderful. But I think when I wrote a lot of this book, you know, my therapist always talks about my inner child, and I didn't really know what they were going on about until I wrote this book. And I was writing about high school, and I, you know, thinking my love of the Spice Girls and all of the things that I loved so much as a 14-year-old, and realised that actually the process of writing really connected with that 14-year-old and helped to like maybe heal some of the things that I didn't really understand at the time.
Absolutely. And so from the book, is it literally from the beginning to where you are now? Do we get to hear everything?
Pretty much. It's sort of from the beginning to just after winning Celebrity Big Brother, because that was like a real, I guess, a bookend to my journey. Not the last part of the book, but like it was a good place to end it. In some ways, I kind of think that the moral of the book is win a competition reality show and everyone will love you, which is really relatable and I think achievable for most people out there. But no, there was something really important for me personally, and the way that I was perceived after winning Celebrity Big Brother that was really like validating.
Well, I think something that struck everybody when you did win Celebrity Big Brother was how kind of calmly and how very articulate you were when you were discussing issues such as queer identity and sexuality, even in the face of some
of the
people,
best-known bigots in the United Kingdom.
Well, yes, who are perhaps not so on board. How do you do that? How do you stay so calm and articulate?
Look, I think that, I guess I'm very fortunate that I had a mum and dad who loved me very much and supported me. And so I have this sort of foundational, like, belief, like, of love from my parents. So I think I approach things with that security. And I know that that's such a privilege that many kids, regardless of whether they're queer or not, don't get. And again, talking about it with my therapist. That I have this approach where I'm like, oh no, I know who I am is good and worthy and lovable. And so when someone disagrees with who I am, I don't feel it as an attack on me. I see it as something that they don't understand. And I just thought, I know who I am. I know that I'm a good person who, you know, is is worthy of, you know, love and being celebrated and all of that sort of stuff. So if someone, say like Anne Widdecombe, didn't understand that, then it was just because she didn't actually understand me. It wasn't something that felt like it took away from me.
Like you personally,
Yeah.
exactly. You mentioned your parents there, which is really lovely because, as you also said, so many people, especially in the queer community, don't necessarily have that kind of understanding with their parents. Do you think that it's important for you to talk about that kind of love that you have with yours?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm really lucky and I know that it's special, but I think for so many parents out there, maybe they don't quite know what they're supposed to do, or their kid comes to them and tells them something like maybe like I'm gay or whatever, and maybe parents don't always know what to do. And I think the most important thing is just to love your child unconditionally. You know, if your little boy likes feminine things or if your little girl likes masculine things, that's just who they are intrinsically. It doesn't mean anything good or bad, and that the best thing to do for any parent out there is to love their child and to affirm whoever they are and however that presents, and stop not trying to like force them into being something you think they're supposed to, or something that you think you should be or you weren't or you think they should be, but rather just whoever they are.
Well, you certainly, you know, came across so well on Celebrity Big Brother, and I think that's why so many of us in the UK love you. But of course, you're very well known for RuPaul's Drag Race Series 6. Top 3 of Series 6. Absolutely fabulous outfit here. How did your life alter after Drag Race?
Oh my gosh, it was so much fun because we just got to tour the world doing these massive gigs, like feeling like pop stars. And sort of living that dream as like a young kid growing up in Australia, to be on like a tour bus with bunk beds, like a proper tour bus, and traveling around the UK and Europe and around the US was just really thrilling. And also those two on the screen, Bianca and Adore, were such an important and special part of the whole journey. We were in the top 3 together and we just became thick as thieves. To this day, Adore, Bianca, Darian and myself have got a group chat. I'm going to be seeing them at the end of the month. We're doing some gigs in London, and it's always a joy when we get to spend time together. And this is going to be a tour of like 4 cities in maybe 5 days. So even though that's a lot of work, we'll be in bunk beds on a tour bus for 5 days. And there's actually something just so fun about like getting to be there with your best friends late at night after a show. You're all tired, but you're in your bunk beds and you're all giggling and having fun.
Absolutely. We'd love to see the sisterhood on Drag Race. Drag Race is obviously so huge. Do you think that maybe there's sometimes the idea that the problem with Drag Race might be that that's what people think drag is, just Drag Race?
Yeah, it's funny. Trixie Mattel says if you say you like drag and you only watch Drag Race, is like saying you like music but you only watch Pop Idol.
Right.
And I think that's a really good comparison. Like, Drag Race is wonderful because it's brought drag to people's living rooms, and people now get to see what it is that we all love about dressing up in hair and makeup and costumes. And, you know, I could have dressed up in boys' things, but they're just not nearly as exciting. Like, when I was growing up thinking about male pop stars, like Elton John, Bowie, I mean, like Jake Shears from the Scissor Sisters is like a more modern version, Adam Lambert. But even still, it's like a bit of a sequin jacket, maybe, some sparkles on your sunglasses. Whereas like I get wigs and costumes and dresses and heels. And I think that for people watching Drag Race, it's a really lovely entry into the world of drag. But I guess it's not all drag is, but it is a really good representation of it. But I think, you know, people go looking online and maybe going out and seeing local drag shows. There's a lot of fun to be had, especially in London. You're really lucky in the UK because the type of drag that the UK has it's almost like fringe festival. It's a bit artistic. It's funny and it's fun. I mean, there's the End of the Pier drag as well, which has its own place. There's a lot of amazing drag artists that haven't been on Drag Race, like Cheddar Gorgeous and the House of Gorgeous and Holly Stars, and people who are doing Adam All, people who are doing great, fun, wonderful drag in the UK.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, Pride Month, and you'll be doing some shows a bit later on.
Yeah.
But of course, it's Pride time here in the UK. Tell us a bit about what you're going to be doing.
Well, so it's London Pride, but because it's London Pride, which is one of the biggest and most exciting prides in the world, Sydney World Pride is happening next February and March in Sydney. And basically every 2 years, World Pride happens in a different city. And next year it's in Sydney. So I'm sort of, I guess, like bringing the glory of Sydney World Pride to tell people in the UK that they should come to Australia in February. I know what the weather's like here in February. It's not somewhere you really want to be.
It's really not.
But in Sydney, it's summer. It'll be glorious, and there's plenty of amazing events. But yeah, I'm doing a bit of a cocktail party tomorrow night, which is also happens to be the day of my book launch. So I think that I'm actually just co-opting the Sydney World Pride cocktail party to make it about my book launch. And then on Pride, I'm going to be, around Soho, hanging out and having fun with friends and enjoying the festivities.
There we are, Courtney's new book, Caught in the Act, will be out tomorrow. Time for a final check on the weather now. It's a dry night to come with lows of around 12 degrees overnight. Friday looks to become more settled with long sunny spells and highs of 22. Looking ahead, it's a dry and sunny start on Saturday, but a band of cloud accompanied by a few showers is expected to move around through the middle of the day, and it's more of the same throughout the end of the weekend on Sunday. Well, that's it from all of us this evening. For updates throughout the day, do head over to our social channels. You can find us in all the usual places at London Live. But from now and from all of us here, have a lovely evening, and I'll see you tomorrow at 6 o'clock.